Hi, everybody. My name is Miles, and I'm with Peak Performers. I'm a disability inclusion partner here at Peak Performers. So it's my job to educate and raise awareness about disability and specifically what that means within the professional work environment. About a year back, I started a series called My Disability Story, and I'm so glad to bring the 13th installment of that, where I'm going to be interviewing Daniel Hodges. I had a chance to meet up with Daniel a little while back, and he brings such a unique and compelling perspective. So I hope that you'll stick with me to hear what he has to say. Daniel, thank you very much for coming on the show. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Likewise. And if you don't mind, please introduce yourself. Who are you and what are you all about?
I am joining you from East Texas, and when you and I first connected, I was doing some webinars on inclusive hiring done correctly. So that's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. Professionally, I have a JD from University of Baltimore and a master's in health administration from Western Governors University. And I run a nonprofit called Pieces of Me Foundation that we'll talk about later that I started while I was in law school. Like most of your guests, I have a disability. Actually, I have multiple. I was born with a rare form of retinitis pigmentosa, and I was also born with a connective tissue disorder called Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome. And funny enough, if you look through the medical literature, those two things don't pop up very often, if at all, as being comorbid conditions. So I won the genetic lottery in my own way. We'll talk about later, but my why for doing all this is along the way as I was, you know, getting through education and getting into the workforce to starting my own organization, I've experienced a number of hurdles I'm sure that we'll touch on. And that prompted me to look around and say, okay, I'm in a position where I can use my experience to teach others about what inequality, what lack of opportunity truly looks like. And that's what I love doing so that other people don't have to fall into the same traps or fall into the same complications as I did.
Tell me about that. Like, what is it like to experience that?
From a pathological perspective, it's a disorder of the collagen. So that means that collagen is one of the foundational tissues of the body. It's kind of the body's glue, so it's in everything. Every organ, every other kind of tissue, there's collagen there somewhere. And with Ehlers-Danlos, there's either an insufficient amount of collagen or the collagen you make is of a poor quality. They don't quite know which yet. The bottom line from a lived experience perspective is you live with a lot of injuries, mostly soft tissue injuries, although I've broken somewhere in the area of 12, 10 bones in my life. I've had surgery all over the country. There's GI things, there's neurological things, there's other things I have to watch out for. It is not a disorder that is known for shortening lifespan, but
Hmm.
it's definitely a disorder that is known for being progressive and throwing a lot of different stuff at you at once.
So does it typically change by the day, by the week, by the hour? Like, what does that look like from just kind of a coping perspective?
When I wake up in the morning, before I even open my eyes, I know 9 times out of 10 at least that something's going to be hurting.
Hmm.
Now, the question is going to be, is it a hand? Is it a wrist? Is it an elbow? Is it a hip? Is it a foot? Am I waking up with a nauseating migraine? Is it some combination of those things? You have to learn to live with the uncertainty and say, okay, whatever it is, I know how to, adapt to it. I'm able to, deal with if the pain's down at like a 3 or a 4 out of 10, then you handle it one way. If it's up at a 7 or 8, then you deal with it another way and you try to set your expectations for that day accordingly.
And so the other portion of you, the vision loss portion, like tell me about that. Like where did that come from?
Yeah, so I have no vision in my right eye. I used to have a smidge of vision in my right eye, but I had a surgery in 1999 when I was 15, where my eye actually rejected an artificial lens. Again, thanks again, Ehlers-Danlos. Um, and in my left eye, I've got a little bit of peripheral vision.
Hmm.
It's been relatively stable-ish, although now you have the combination of retinal damage that I've always had, combined with inflammation of the front of the eye, which again is a byproduct of the EDS.
What would you tell other people that wake up every day hurting? What would you tell people that have unpredictable conditions in order to help motivate themselves and keep going?
I believe it is important for everyone to figure out what their why is
Yeah.
and keep a finger on that pulse throughout their life. I believe it is critically important for
Hmm.
those of us who deal with chronic pain and unpredictable pain, because what I learned as I was going through my diagnostic journey with Ehlers-Danlos, which by the way was happening in when I was in my early 30s, I learned that if I wanted to stay in the workforce,
Hmm.
if I wanted to get ahead of disease progression, I had to find and maintain not just a job, but a calling that spoke to me deeply enough that I'm so excited about what I get to do that day that it actually helps me short circuit the pain cycle. Otherwise, there's no way.
With all the experiences that you've had growing up, when were you first diagnosed?
We knew about the blindness at around 4 or 5 is what they tell me.
Okay.
Because I was not able to watch TV from across the room or those sorts of things, which was pretty obvious. And I would hold things up to my eye when I
Hmm.
wanted to see something. But at the same time, I'd also go out and ride my bike throughout the neighborhood. And people were like, he just stopped right in front of that drop off. Surely he has to be able to see something.
Hmm.
And so it was all about trying to establish, what was going on and trying to break free from some of the misconceptions, at an early age.
Hmm.
I think it's important to mention here too that I didn't have access to Braille or a long white cane or any of those things until I was a few months shy of my 18th birthday. Everything prior to that was, how do we magnify the print so that I could see it well enough, and how do we um how do we milk every last drop out of the remaining eyesight you have versus learning adaptive techniques. And
Hmm.
that culminated in me actually missing 5 full years of my K-12 education.
Really?
Seventh through 11th grade, I was supposed to be getting homeschooled. That didn't happen, but I wasn't in public school, and it was just hanging out and trying to grab whatever little nuggets of knowledge I could. But that certainly took a toll on things like study skills. And then for senior high, for senior high, I was in the school for the blind
Hmm.
for what should have been my senior year of high school. And that's where I learned the Braille and the white cane and stuff. I went from that into getting better training in Colorado and a GED and then onward. Yeah, I mean, I broke the first few bones just out there doing stuff, playing sports, being
Hmm.
clumsy. Um, I broke an ankle putt golfing because I was being an idiotic, 20-year-old man
Hey,
doing stupid
we've all
things.
been there.
Actually get to the diagnosis of Ehlers-Danlos until as I was saying, in my early 30s.
Hmm.
And that came from well over a decade of searching, going to specialist after specialist, being told there's nothing wrong with you, or just it's in your head, or whatever the case may be.
Hmm.
Actually learning to question my own pain tolerance, because, well, if they can't see anything and everything shows up well, you must just not be able to tough it out. And we found out later, oh, those things you were toughing out were actual, legitimate tendon and ligament damage. an unbelievable amount of pain for most people oftentimes isn't for me.
Hmm.
So I had a time where I dislocated my elbow
Hmm.
by falling and just falling right on it. And I didn't even realize it at the time because I just said, okay, well, fell, hurt my elbow, no blood, no worries. I got a meeting to go to, got in my Uber and went on my way. That's a good thing in the sense of it keeps you from being debilitated by the pain, but at the same time, it warps your ability to do self-care in a conventional sense.
Like, is having that level of pain constantly, like, is it distraction? Is it something that you're constantly thinking about, or is it just something that you learn to ignore, or like, what does that look like?
I try to learn to ignore it, like,
Yeah.
even again, with the elbow as an example, I re-aggravated it a couple weeks ago, and so even as we're sitting here today, I can't actually straighten out my left arm right now. I think it's important to mention here too,
Yeah.
when I went and got my bachelor's, it wasn't a 4-year thing,
Mm.
and part of that was because when I got to college, my mental health, which had always been a bit of a struggle, started to really escalate on me.
Mm.
And by the time I got to my 3rd year of college, I was trying to treat it with medications and therapy and the like. And the medications didn't take, they actually made it worse. I was at a point in my life where I knew how to go down to the disability office and say, hey, I need, a reader, or I need, this thing on, on tape, or I need, this thing magnified. I didn't know how to go down to the office and say, look, I just started, 6 different psych meds and I can't even think straight. I can't remember my own name. And
Yeah.
so by the time I was really at a point where I couldn't. I was sleeping, man, 18 hours a day, trying
Mm.
to get rid of the anxiety, trying to get rid of the depression, stabilize my mood. And by that point, I had a semester of straight Fs and a previous semester of barely scraping by. I don't remember that year of my college path hardly at all.
Yeah.
And what that ended up doing is I ended up having to drop out of that school, go work for a couple of years, and then I went
Mm.
back to a different school that was online, competency based, and self paced.
Mm.
And then I was able to get through my bachelor's, go on a couple years later, go on to law school, and then go on after that and finish it off with the master's degree.
And law school is no small feat either. Like, I have many different people that I've known in my life that have gone through law school, and it just sounds incredibly difficult to me. From just a knowledge perspective, everything you have to memorize, like, what was that like for you?
For those who are unfamiliar with it,
Mm.
the first thing I would say is in back in with your bachelor's degree, usually full time is considered to be 12 credits, although you can go up to 18 or more.
Mhm.
With my master's degree, full time was 9 credits.
Mhm.
With the law degree, your first year is, I want to say, 16 credits per semester. So it is harder and it is just quantitatively more than what you deal with in other programs. When law school was first on my radars, when 2 different mentors came to me, they've never talked to each other. This happened independently of each other. They said, "Look, you're smart, you're articulate, you're a great advocate. Why wouldn't you go to law school?" And the excuse I gave them both was, what about access issues? What about being able to afford it? What about being able to deal with chronic pain? I mean, it's physically demanding, even though it's just being a student. And in the back of my mind, because what I had been through, the other question was, am I smart enough?
Mm.
And I will tell you, everything else though, access issues, check. Financial issues, check. Demanding curriculum, check. Dealing with chronic pain as being a part of the problem, check. Heck, I had two surgeries while I was in law school, and I had to deal with COVID twice.
Wow.
But even though every one of my fears was at least somewhat, if not completely valid,
Hmm.
and then some, I would not go back and change it because it was worth it. It was worth facing every one of those fears and then some and coming out the other side. So sometimes we think when we're trying to break free of ableism or low expectations, we think, oh, well, those expectations or those fears are wrong. Well, maybe that's right, but that's not the full picture.
Hmm.
Because if we say that, then we concede, well, if they're right, then maybe it's not worth doing. No, even if they're right, even if everything you can imagine goes wrong actually does go wrong, it still may very well be worth it. So I think that's the important thing to get out of really this conversation in my mind.
You mentioned that you personally use VoiceOver, which is a technology that allows blind people to be able to interface with phones or computers. But tell me about some of the other different technologies and accommodations that you use on a regular basis to get your work done.
Most of my stuff is on either the phone or the iPad, and the reason for that is because if I'm having again a bad pain day, I can do my reading and be in bed, or I can dictate an email and be in bed, and so that's one way I get around things. I did recently change keyboards because
Hmm.
I found that the Apple Magic keyboard was tearing apart my hands.
Yeah.
And I would wake up and I'd have one or two fingers that I wouldn't be able to move. They were so swollen. The most crucial thing out of all of this is learning to recalibrate how I gauge success. Because there are some days where I can sit down and I can write for a few hours. I can do interviews like this. I can do whatever I want to. And I'm going to feel charged by the end of the day. And there were other days where maybe success is just reading an edifying book
Hmm.
on a topic that matters to my work. Maybe having a phone call or two, maybe not, and just think, okay, I'm going to strategically punt on this day at least a little bit so that I can rock it in a day or two.
Previously, when you worked for other employers, was that difficult to navigate your accommodation needs within those employers?
Fortunately, I was very blessed
Hmm.
in the last few years where I've had pretty inclusive employers, especially when you have that conversation early on and say, look, my work is going to be top notch and you're going to get it, but you may not get it in quite the intervals that you're expecting. So it's very important to have a clear conversation with your employer and say, look, if you're looking for quality over quantity, and if you're looking for deliverables that meet deadlines, even if you don't get one thing every day, if you're willing to step outside the box, then there's a lot of potential here. When I worked for a major retailer and stocked shelves for a few years back in the late aughts, there was a whole different ball game there because there had to be things happening every single day, and I like physically could I do that again now? No way.
Hmm.
But but I think maybe part of the conversation then is to say, even if I've lost this one capacity, what else do I have in the toolbox? And keep searching because I was a pretty good stalker and I could have been a pretty good lawyer, but I am a much better social entrepreneur
Okay.
and it works way better with my body. So I think it's about saying, okay, we're not just blessed with a gift, we're blessed with multiple gifts and doing the work to figure out what aligns with us in a particular season of our life is always important, but especially if you're trying to figure out how to work with a body that is you know, having some sort of pain or other trials.
I love that, a social entrepreneur. And I think this is actually a good moment to pause and talk about your consulting work and particularly the perspective that you offer to your customers.
Yeah, so I work with organizations of all stripes, and sometimes it's going in and just having that introductory conversation. What does disability, what does accessibility actually mean? And sometimes it's teaching students about disability history. Sometimes it's talking about culture
Mm.
and how to create a culture where everyone can thrive. There is an interplay between opportunity and accountability on one side and equity and inclusion on the other. And we
Mm.
have to have those things together if we really want to achieve any form of meritocracy. I tell people that if you really want to bring the best candidates to the table, and honestly, who wouldn't? Well, you can't freeze out 25% of the population because they can't access your stuff because they're battling uphill against some sort of bias you may not even know you have.
Mm.
And so that's where we say, look, my philosophy is let me compete in an arena free of bias and barriers, and may the best candidate win.
And I think that that's such an important thing because ultimately, people with disabilities, by and large, do not want special treatment. All they want is a chance to swing the bat. People with disabilities are capable, they are eager to do things, and a lot of times they have overcome tremendous barriers to be able to get to the point where they're at today. I'm curious what you think of this too, because I have started looking at disability sometimes is actually a unique qualifier that some people have. Where could we start to evaluate and see disability even coming up beyond the resume, but when you're doing that initial screening call with a recruiter?
The fact of the matter is, living with a disability, you are navigating a world that was not designed with you in mind. That is just one of the fundamental truths of living with a disability. And so, while it may not be top of mind for the resume, it's a very real skill. The ability to think outside the box, to look at the picture differently. If you're in a position where you're looking for creativity, you're looking for ingenuity, you're looking for resilience, that's our population by and large. Living in a world that doesn't consider your needs and thriving anyway, I don't see how you can do that and not become more resilient.
As we start to wrap up, I'd like for you to tell us a little bit more about Pieces of Me and how people can get connected to you.
Pieces of Me Foundation, and we spell it PEACES, and we do that as a play on words, is an organization that is working to erase the stigma surrounding disability and chronic illness. And okay, that's a lot of organizations. Truth. What makes us unique is we intentionally cultivate diversity of thought. We work on calling people in rather than calling them out. We fancy ourselves as an organization that is a great platform to have the tough conversations. And at the time of this recording, I actually just submitted an article for a magazine
Hmm.
talking about how my co-founder and I are very different in our world and our worldviews, and how that is a fundamental strength of our organization. We provide training, we provide community education, we help, we point people toward resources, all of it trying to help everyone, including ourselves, level up in our awareness and in our ability to create the kind of world where everyone has the opportunity to live their best lives.
Well, I will include a link for Daniel's website in the article write up afterwards, too. I hope that you have a chance to connect with him about Pieces of Me and all the valuable work that he's doing. Daniel, I want to thank you for coming on the show today to talk about your disability story. Any final words for our guests?
The companies that are watching, one thing I talk about if you want to be truly inclusive and maintain a meritocracy at the same time, it starts by doing mainstream things such as design thinking and job crafting. If you can incorporate those sorts of skills into your culture, you're going to intrinsically make your workplace more inclusive. For those of you who are out there who are where I am or have been where I am or anything along those lines, it's no secret that thriving in this world is hard. It's no secret that thriving, particularly with unpredictable disabilities that mess with your everyday life, is hard. But there's real power in finding your why, finding your gifts, and even if you can't do everything you thought you were going to be able to do or you want to be able to do, the things you are able to do still matter and your effort still matters.
Thank you, Daniel. Appreciate you coming on today. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you. Likewise.